Everybody, welcome back. We are going to dive into front vowels now. We talked about this a little bit in the last lecture when we were introduced to vowels, but we're going to go into more detail about what are the front vowels. So just a reminder, when we are looking at the vowel quadrilateral, we're looking at the different dimensions of where the tongue is. So whether the tongue is high in the mouth, mid, or low. We're also looking at where it is on a horizontal plane. So whether the sounds are made in the front, central, or back. We're looking at whether the tongue is tense or whether it's lax, depending on the muscle tension. And then we're looking at whether we're making the vowel sounds with our lips rounded or retracted. So just a reminder, when we're mapping this onto the vowel quadrilateral, tenseness is represented by triangles and roundness by the circles. So the front vowels, I'm just going to say them, are E, I, A, E, and A. All the front vowels in English are unrounded, so you will not be seeing any circles on those. So let's start with E. This is what we call, and it was mentioned in the book, one of the cardinal vowels. So it's one of the vowels actually that children learn first because it is so distinctive, such a distinctive sound. So E is considered high. It's a high vowel. It is a front vowel. It's made with the tongue in front of the mouth. As we just mentioned, all of these are unrounded. It's in extreme. So if you look at the vowel quadrilateral, it's one of the corners. It's also called a corner vowel, extreme front position. It's produced in both English and Spanish. So the body of the tongue is high in front and the root is advanced. So if you looked at it on an image, we looked at some sagittal images, the lower pharynx would be wide. The jaw is in a closed position. Your lips are retracted, right? So E, feel that you could see that and feel it. And as we talk about vowels, we're talking about the velar pharynx being closed and the velum being in a high position. And that's what is that unobstructed airflow when we talk about vowels. So some words, examples for it are eat, meat, sheet, and heat. So what I'd like you to do as you go through this presentation is to pause it and to see if you can figure out which of these words have the E vowel in them. And then I will post the answer key for this. Okay. So let's do the first one together. So the word fleet. You almost just have to look at my mouth, right? Fleet. That definitely has the E sound in it. But what about bin? Now, what we don't want to do is get hung up on the spelling, the words, right? We talked about that in the first week. Spelling does not translate to IPA transcription. So although it looks like we would have that sound, it's actually bin that is sound, which we're going to talk about next. And then how about tree? Tree definitely has the E sound. Okay. The next front vowel we're going to talk about is I. So this is also high. So produced, the tongue is high in the mouth, but it's considered a mid front vowel. Now this is a lax vowel. So you could feel the tension of E, but I, as you can see, there's not the same tension in my mouth, right? This is also all the front vowels are unrounded. So the body is high, mid, front, and the pharynx is less wide than it is for E. The jaw is in a somewhat closed position. And as we're talking about vowels, we're going to keep saying this, the velar pharynx is closed. The velum is in a high position. So if you were seeing that on an image, you would see that. So let's talk about some words that I is in. So fit, knit, hit, limp, and ling. Now, you could, if you're saying limp and ling, you do have that nasal phonetic changing of the vowel slightly because of those nasal consonants being next to it. So again, I'd like you to pause the video and see if you can figure out which words have this I sound in them. This will help you get ready for transcribing, which you're going to be doing soon. So what about the word fed? F, I, D. No, right? That's an E. What about pretty? Again, don't worry about the spelling. So it may help to divide the sounds up as I just did. So pr, I, T. I hear the I in there, right? Okay. Let's move on. The next one we're going to talk about is A. So A, we're going to also talk about next week when we talk about diphthongs. Don't worry about it yet. We'll talk about that next week because sometimes you're going to see it transcribed as a diphthong. But for today, we're talking about it as one of the pure front vowels. So A is a mid-front vowel, and it's tense. So you felt the tenseness with E, but A, you can see also that it's unrounded. You can see my lips are retracted. It's produced in both English and Spanish. Again, the tongue body is in that mid-front position. The jaw is in a mid position. So A, lips are retracted. And again, the velopharynx is closed unless we have that nasal quality because of the adjacent nasal consonant. So some of the words would be bait, hate, fame, and vacation. So as you see in the note here, sometimes when it's being transcribed, it is transcribed as a diphthong. We are going to accept either when you do your transcriptions. And it really varies. So even in articulation tests, sometimes the articulation tests will have you transcribe it or look for it as a pure vowel. And sometimes it is expected to be transcribed as a diphthong. So let's look at this first line, and I'm going to have you do the same thing, pause and do the rest on your own. But what about the word able? Do you hear the A sound? It's the first sound, right, in the word. How about ache? And again, the first sound in that word. How about apple? Apple. No, right? That's not A, it's A. So we're going to talk about that now. Okay, next one we're going to talk about is eh. So eh is low, mid, front. This is a lax vowel, eh. And it's unrounded. You can see my lips are not rounded, eh, when I make it. So the tongue body is low. So even though this can get very confusing, so it's helpful to kind of maybe have that vowel quadrilateral out in front of you as you're going through this. Even though it's a front vowel, it's made low. Your tongue is low in the mouth. Your jaw is in mid position. Again, we talked about your lips are definitely not rounded for this eh. And as with all the vowels we're talking about here, your velopharynx is closed unless you have that nasal consonant adjacent to it. So some of the words would be head, let, pen, friend, send, and empathy. So again, pen and friend, they're going to be a little different because of the n sound next to them. So let's look at this first line and try and figure out if we can find this eh vowel in these words. So let's talk about many. Meh. I always think when I think of the actually when I think of the sound, I think of that word meh. That's a good way to remember it. I like to associate a word with these vowels, not just the vowel on its own. So you definitely hear meh as the first syllable in that word. So you guys can go through the rest of these on your own. Okay, I said that we were going to talk about the vowel. So this, again, it's going to the front vowels, it's in front, but it is low. It's a low front vowel, it is lax. So, ah, and it's unrounded. You could see my mouth, ah, it's definitely not rounded. It can be distinguished as tense. And I just want to mention something else because I had mentioned before that pure vowels are represented by one symbol and diphthongs by two symbols. This may look like it's two, but it's actually just supposed to represent one symbol. So don't let that trip you up. This is one of the pure vowels. Tongue, as I mentioned, is low in front in your mouth. The jaw is in an open position. Ah. And the lips are unrounded, usually retracted, not retracted as much as in the E, right? Velar is closed unless you have the adjacent nasal impacting it. So let's talk about some of the words. So dad, hat, cat, right? And let's look at the next one. So let's do the first one together. So remember the vowel is ah. So drat, dra, ah, ah. You hear that sound, right? So you can look at the rest of these on your own, see if you can find it. And that's it for our front vowels. So I look forward to seeing you next in our last lecture for this week, which is going to be the back vowels.